Hey guys, welcome back to Falcons Central Radio, part of the Pro Football Central Radio Network. I am one of your hosts, Aaron Freeman. Today I'm joined by none other than former Georgia Bulldog tight end Randy McMichael. You can find him now at 92.9 The Game's College Football Game Time show. Welcome to the show, Randy.
Hey, Aaron, I appreciate you having me on. And before we go any further, I'm always a dog. I'm a former NFL tight end, but I'm always a dog.
I'm sorry about that. Let me former NFL tight end, eternal, forever Georgia Bulldog. Your favorite Georgia Bulldog tight ends, favorite Georgia Bulldog tight end, Randy McMichael. All right,
I like that.
All right, so we're going to be talking today about the Falcons, of course, as we do every week on this show. Recapping their Week 4 loss to the Bengals, talking a little bit about their upcoming matchup against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Randy, since you're new to the show, typically what we talk about first thing is any roster moves, but the big move today in terms of the roster is the news that Grady Jarrett, the defensive tackle, is going to miss some time with an ankle injury, and it seems like this Falcon team has been very snake-bitten by injury. I'm curious to sort of ask you about your experiences in the NFL, whether you ever played on a team that seemed to constantly each week get a new player in the training room, a new core starter player, and sort of what do you think is going on with the Falcons with all these injuries mounting up?
Man, you know what? When it rains, it pours. And I just remember doing all like the preseason shows down here in Atlanta about this Falcons, and everybody was so excited about this young, hungry defense. And we knew that eventually. We said, there's too much talent on this offense for them to kind of slump like they did last year. We all kind of anticipated them getting it back together. But we were so excited about this defense. And I've been on record saying I thought Deion Jones was going to be a superstar middle linebacker. I thought Keanu O'Neal was going to take that next step to being a Pro Bowl strong safety. Grady Jarrett is playing for his contract that he wants to be paid like one of the highest paid D tackles. It was his year. And Ricardo Allen, if you ever got a chance to be around him or interview him, I say this all the time about him, he is Marquand Manuel and Dan Quinn on the field. That's why he got his money. No, he's not the most talented guy, but he knows where everybody's supposed to be. And if you're going to beat Ricardo, you beat him because you just physically made the play. You're not going to beat him because you tricked him. And so, it's been a frustrating 4 weeks down here because you see what the offense is doing. And, in Philly, they stumped their toe. I mean, you get 7 chances inside the 5 and you don't score. Defense plays well, and then you lose all of your core of the defense. I always say, one of the most overused phrases in sports when somebody gets hurt is next man up. But if you ain't got that next man that can at least be half of what those guys are, and what I mean by those guys are in the training room right now, then you're not going to be successful. And you've seen that these last 2 weeks. Yeah,
we talked to Ricardo shortly after the Super Bowl on this show, and you're exactly right. You wouldn't necessarily put him at the top of the list of like the most talented safeties in the league, but he's definitely a leader. And I was very impressed with Ricardo in sort of his response to that, sort of debacle at the end of that Super Bowl a couple of years ago. And it seems like all the hits keep on coming for this Falcons defense with so much of their leadership, so much of their core players. Now with Jarrett, you had Jones, you have Neal, you have Allen, pretty much the spine that during the middle of this defense is basically missing time. Obviously, this Jarrett injury is not as serious as some of those season-ending ones to those other guys, but that's another big blow that I don't know if the Falcons can overcome, and now it puts more pressure on the young guys trying to come up, the Deidrin Sanats of the world, their rookie D-tackle. It also puts more pressure on the offense to sort of basically have to be perfect. And we saw on Sunday against the Bengals, they were pretty close to perfect. They, maybe a couple of opportunities, a couple of red zone trips that you wanted to be touchdowns, but wound up being field goals. And just that small margin of error ultimately sort of cost them the game. I'm curious, what were your thoughts watching that Bengals game this past Sunday?
Oh, I'm 100% in agreement with you. I thought that, the Falcons' offense, they can't struggle because if the Falcons' offense struggles, what's going on with the defense, they'll get blown out of games. And this offense was rolling, and I came out. I have this new phrase now: 30 runs. I think the Falcons, you got to get 30 runs per game. but you paid Matt Ryan $150 million. So when he's cooking, you got to throw the football. And they got so many playmakers with the addition of Calvin Ridley. And what I saw in that game was it was just they didn't seize on opportunities. You get the block punt, first play after that, you get a penalty. You get a sack. I mean, you get another big play. You're inside the red zone. Then all of a sudden, you get another penalty. Your offensive tackle get blown up. You get a sack. I mean, they didn't take prime opportunity when they had it to put that game away. And that goes back on the offense. But, I mean, if you look defensively, you know, the first half they played a lot more zone, which I thought they would because I thought that pass rush could get home with 4. Because I really thought, you know what, I thought that Tack and I thought that Vic can have their way with the tackles for the Bengals. And you saw that in the second half when they went more man-to-man and held the receivers up a little bit more. But that also puts you susceptible to having Trufant in the slot where I don't think he should be playing. He's an outside guy. And you saw that them and Boyd, they took advantage of that, and they were able to move the football.
Yeah, I think you're right. You know, and it's weird because you saw the defense struggle so much in the first half of that game. No pressure. It just seemed like basically the Bengals could do whatever they wanted to do. If they wanted to run the football, they ran the football. If they wanted to pass it, they passed it. And they just moved the ball up and down the field on the Falcons in that first half. But then you started to see things come alive for them in the second half. The pass rush stepping up. You saw Tack hit those 3 sort of drive-killing sacks. You saw Vic Beasley have one of the better games he's had in quite some time. It's been a while since we saw that Vic Beasley. And the secondary seemed to do a lot better job, you know, slowing up the Bengals receivers until they didn't at the very end of that game. And I think you're right. With Trufant sort of moving into the slot, it was an interesting choice of the Falcons to have basically Robert Alford shadow A.J. Green and then have Trufant move into the slot. Typically, the way that they've done it in the past was have more of Alford in the slot, with right. Trufant being more of that outside guy. I won't necessarily second-guess the coach's decisions because I think with those 2 cornerbacks, you expect either one of those guys to be able to take care of business regardless of where you put them on in the field. But certainly towards the end of that game, Tyler Boyd got the better of Trufant a couple too many times, and it kind of cost the Falcons in the end.
Yeah, I'm with you. And you pay Trufant. Trufant is making number 1 corner money, and you're right. He should be able to guard anybody anywhere on the field. And right now, I mean, last year and so far this year, I think Alford has played better than him. And I think Trufant, I mean, we challenge him because, I mean, I'm not the type of man that counts another man dollars, but when you talk to fans, I mean, they know what he's making, and they know that he hasn't played well so far this year. And, you know, you look at the game last week, he had a chance to ice the game with an interception, just catch the football. He doesn't make that play. And what you saw them with Cincinnati was doing, where they were running them crossing routes. He was able to get away from Trufant. But overall, I mean, you look at guys that are on that back end that just aren't used to playing those roles. I love KZ. He had an interception last game. I love Poole. I think this guy, he's hard-nosed, a great blitzer, and he does what he's supposed to do. Now, he had a boo-hoo in the Saints game, but, I mean, and then the personal foul penalty, it's like, what are you doing? I mean, that was an unnecessary type hit. I mean, the ball's incomplete. There's no reason to try and launch yourself into that guy. And him and KZ, they have that problem because whenever you look at them, they're always leading with their helmet and everything. I'm just like, dude, incomplete passes, everything. You see those 2 guys leading with their helmet, and they're going to get a lot of penalties that's going to hurt the football team like it did on Sunday. So when you look at that, coupled with the fact that you lose your most important players, your middle linebacker who calls the defense, and then your free safety and Ricardo who gets everybody lined up, I mean, they're scrambling right now. And I'm not one that says be in a panic mode, but the Falcons are in trouble defensively. They have got to find something that these guys do well and just be that bend but don't break. When you get in the red zone, hold the field goals. Because right now they're struggling because guys are just not familiar with all this playing time that they're getting.
Yeah, I think you're right. And it's interesting because you're not getting some of the, you know, we talked about how some of their best players are sort of out of the lineup with Allen and Neal and Jones and now Jarrett. And then you're now a little bit more reliant on the other guys, the guys that have the experience, the Alfords, the Trufants, the Pools, the Campbells, etc. to sort of step up their game in these last couple of weeks. You just haven't really gotten that from the cornerbacks, but in particular with Poole making some of these mistakes, the missed tackles, the lack of discipline. And I think that's really been the major issue from my perspective with this defense. It's not that they don't have the talent to perform at a much higher level. We all know that they do, but you're just not seeing a team that is playing very disciplined. And I'm curious if you think a lot of that has to do with missing some of those core leaders that could basically take some of these young guys and even some of the veterans under the wings and sort of calm them down and get them sort of focused on Sundays.
Well, I got a chance to interview Dion and Ricardo. And Dion, I mean, when you be around him, you just love his energy. He's such a good guy. And when you talked to them 2 years ago, I talked to them 2 years ago and then last year, the first thing I said to both of them was, I said, who's the leader on this young defense? And to a man, everybody that I interviewed said, that man, Grady Jarrett, that's our leader up there. He gets the troops rally. And then I talked to Grady about it. He said, Dion's our leader. I said, well, who makes this defense go? And everybody said Ricardo. And I was like, huh? And because they remember when they went to Super Bowl the year all of them started, they were all young, learning on the job. If you watch the Falcons at the beginning of the year, that year they went to Super Bowl, those kids just run around with shit like that, like a chicken with their heads cut off, didn't know where they were going. And Ricardo was lining up the defensive line and the linebackers. And as that season went on, they learned and they grew together. And then last year, you just saw how hungry and fast. They're not a big defense, but they're fast, and they run and attack and they hit. And so when you lose that kind of leadership, and I'm just talking about not just because I think Deion Jones is the best defensive player on the Falcons team. Next is Keanu to me, then Grady. When you lose that kind of production, when I say again, when you lose those guys, you're in trouble. And when you lose another important guy to an ankle injury in Grady, because one thing I know about ankles in football and defensive alignment, they don't get better throughout the season. You bandage it, but it's not going to be. If you're missing weeks because of an injury like that, being a plus 300-pounder or 290 whatever grade it is, it's going to linger all year. So now you go back to number 98, Tack. He had a dominant game. They lined him inside. I mean, he was just dominant. 44, he got to show up. And he got to show up in a major way. Now, I thought he was attacking. But it's always when you're at a point where this Falcons defense is, you got to make the play. He's got to get that ball out of Andy Dalton's hand right there. You know what I'm saying? He's got to cause that fumble. Now, as nitpicky as it is, when you're talking about in a situation where your defense is thin and you're losing all those guys, and you're supposed to be one of those guys, you got to get that ball out. I mean, it was a great effort. I applaud it, but you got to make that play. And without those guys, that's really in the middle of your defense. If you look, your defensive tackle, your middle linebacker, your strong safety, and your free safety, the middle of that defense is there. It's just going to be tough sledding right now for these guys.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you perfectly summarized it, because I think it's really about taking advantage of all the opportunities that you can take advantage of. And if that's a sack strip, if that's a turnover, if that's a dropped interception, you can't have those plays go against you, given how small the margin of error is for this defense, given that the fact is that only allowing 34 points or whatever would be a good day for this defense, given how much you think the offense can put on the board. And speaking of offense, I'm curious to get your thoughts on the offense, where is the opposite of the defense, where everything seems to be going wrong for that defense, but the offense, everything seems to be going right. And I'm curious to get your thoughts on sort of looking at last year, and a lot of criticism directed at Steve Sarkisian in his first year in Atlanta. And it seems like after that Week 1 game, where it seemed to be just a repeat of what we saw against the Eagles in the playoffs, to sort of see this offense really blossom these last couple of games. You've seen Calvin Ridley just basically become a scoring machine. And what's interesting is they haven't even been at full strength offensively, because Devontae Freeman's been out of the lineup, and he may be coming back this week. Do you feel like this offense is still only scratching the surface of their potential?
Well, I really hope so, man. And this is the thing with last year, this year. Steve Sarkisian didn't know how to use his personnel. And what made me so frustrating around here was people were talking about Kyle Shanahan. Kyle Shanahan is one of the best play callers in the National Football League. Steve Sarkisian is not that guy. All right, Kyle does a great job of screening guys open. That was the biggest thing about the year they went to the Super Bowl, guys were open, and Kyle did a great job of scheming. Sark didn't do that. He's doing that now because he's familiar with his personnel. And just like the first year Kyle got here, after the year, everybody wanted to fire Kyle Shanahan, fire this guy. He doesn't know what he's doing. Fire him, fire him, fire him. Then he comes back and he's more comfortable with the personnel and his quarterback, and then you go to the Super Bowl. Last year, it was, fire Sark, fire Sark, fire Sark. And now you see the offense more comfortable. The thing with the Philly game was that they were singling Julio Jones. Well, you single Julio Jones, he's getting targets. I'm sorry. That's how it goes. Now you're seeing that what Sark is doing now is that even though teams are doubling Julio a little bit more than what they did in Philly, he's spreading the ball out more. And they're finding those matchups. And right now, Calvin, it seems like he's been matched up on the third corner. Now, that second touchdown he caught, he was on Drake Kirkpatrick, and he gave him that nod. I mean, he is such a great route runner. And, I mean, that nod, he nodded him and went to the scene, and Matt hit him in stride. And then you got Mohamed Sanu involved. And then, I mean, we got to get Hooper more involved. And when the thing, we did this on our show, our Wait For It tailgate show before the game, and we were talking about the running back situation. And, you know, they're more successful when just one of those guys play. And that's because Sark can shrink down his play sheet, where on his play sheet he has a box, these are Freeman's plays, these are Coleman's plays. Well, I don't have to use the Freeman box, I can use just the Coleman box. And then you throw in Ito Smith in here as a nice change of pace, and the offense is rolling. So, Al, I'm interested to see how they're going to incorporate Devontae back in the offense, because I'm from the old school, and my coach always told me this: you can never have enough good football players. All right, you'll find a way to get good football players involved, and Devontae Freeman is one of your better players on the team. So that's going to be an interesting thing. But this offense, as long as this O-line can hold up, and they have struggles at times, and when you're going against a guy like Geno Atkins, and then you went against Fletcher Cox, I mean, then you go against K'Wan Short, I mean, then you go against Cameron in New Orleans. I mean, they've had their work cut out for them these last 4 weeks, and I think they've held up pretty well.
Yeah, I think the offensive line has been, to me, the biggest question mark with the offense, because we've seen some instances late in games where the Falcons are trying to drive down the field and they go to their 5-man protections. And too often, I think the offensive line has given up pressure in those situations, which has sort of stymied the offense. And Matt Ryan hasn't been able to get the ball out quick enough because the pressure is getting in his face. We saw that against Philadelphia. I think we saw that this past week. You know, there was a couple plays that Carl Lawson made at the end of that game that sort of forced the Falcons to settle for a field goal at the end, as opposed to getting that touchdown that would have basically potentially sealed the win for them at that point. And, you know, I think the offensive line, we've seen better days from this offensive line. So I'm hoping that, you know, this is just a slow start. But my concern is just because you have so many of these starters, with the exception of Jake Matthews, on the quote-unquote wrong side of 30, is there a possibility that this offensive line may be sort of hitting that wall that you tend to see with older players at some point where guys start to hit that decline?
I really hope not. And this is the thing. You signed Jake. I think Ryan Schrader was one of the best bargains when they signed. He's got to play better. All right? He didn't play that well last year, and he's up and down this year. The Falcons have got to go out and start spending some draft capital on young linemen. I mean, I love Alex Mack, but Alex, he's getting up there in age, just like you said. You know, you got Wes Schweitzer, who was starting at right guard last year. Levitre goes down, he's going to left guard. Now, he's playing better right now than he did last year. All right, I'll give you that. Now, he's still having some issues, but he's playing better than he played last year. Then you look at Fusco. Fusco's a veteran. He's rugged. He's tough, but he's having some problems getting pushed in the backfield. So this offensive line, and I agree 100% with you, these guys, these are your five. This is what you're rolling with right now. And I think they're so much better when they're running the ball consistently. And you saw that against the Carolina game. They dominated that Carolina Panthers line because they were able to move them off the ball, and that just set up the play-action pass, and that helped them guys out. Now, when you're unable to run the ball, that just, you know, when defenses can pin their ears back and get after this offensive line, that's when they struggle. And you said, just like you said, at the end of the Falcons run the ball all day. They should just kept running the football, in my opinion, because they couldn't stop them. But they did everything right that game. They led in time possession. They were able to run the football. But when that run got stymied, then, like you said, Lawson's coming. Then you see Geno's getting pressure. I mean, they were able to get pressure in that space. And I think that was ultimate, you know, that was the ultimate thing in the game, like we were talking about earlier. You get a block punt, you get great field position, you just have to settle for 3. You get the ball inside the red zone, all right? You get a penalty, then you get your left tackle getting blown up by Geno for a tackle for loss, and then you got to settle for 3. I mean, they did everything. Defensively, I mean, they shut the offense down for Cincinnati in the second half, but they couldn't put those touchdowns up to capitalize on the game.
Yeah, you mentioned the running game, and I'm there with you, Randy. It's like, and I think I'm curious what your thoughts are on this, but like because of the defensive issues and the fact that you might have to sort of hide the defense for the foreseeable future until you get Grady Jarrett back, until you get Deion Jones back after the bye week, do you feel like running the football and sort of playing a little bit more of that, that patented Mike Smith ball control type of offense where you do run the ball 30 plus times in a game to try to control the clock and limit time and maximize your own time of possession and limit the opposing team's time of possession? Do you feel like that's a strategy that the Falcons are going to have to look into over these next couple of games?
I mean, once again, they did that this and they controlled the clock. But this is the thing. When you got a $150 million quarterback and he's cooking the way Matt Ryan's been cooking these last few weeks, it's hard to take the ball out of his hand. It is, and I get it and I understand it. But, I mean, like I said, you got to get those 30 runs in. I'm a firm believer in that. But it's so hard. When your quarterback is spinning the ball the way Matt Ryan is and how these receivers are getting open, it's hard to take the ball out of his hand. But you got to do something. You got to find a way. And that's what I was talking about earlier. Maybe you go to it like what the Patriots do. Because remember, the Patriots, they would bend, and you can have everything in the 20. But when we get down to this red zone, we're shutting it down. We're making you settle for field goals, touchdowns. Maybe the Falcons need to try and ingratiate that kind of concept, because right now they're struggling defensively, and a lot of it is one of the most underrated things, in my opinion, in defensive ball in the NFL. Communication. And I love Devondre Campbell. And I was like, this is going to be Devondre's year, because they were talking about letting him rush and everything. Well, Devondre has the green dot now, which is, he gets to play in for Marquand and he calls the defense. Well, he's used to being the guy that gets to play and reacts. Now he's the guy that has to get the call, give them the call, see what's going on, and line guys up. And I thought the Cincinnati did a great job of this formationing, because whenever you get a guy who's not used to calling plays and getting guys lined up, you do different kinds of shifts. You do different kinds of formations that he has to think, and those guys had to think. And that's why I said on our show this weekend, all those guys need to take responsibility for that. All those, you don't have Ricardo back there no more to get you lined up. That means you got to spend extra time in the field room. That means you got to have more team defensive meetings after practice. No, you're not going on. We all going to go in here and we're going to watch some film and we're going to get this corrected. Because right now, that's the only way I see this Falcons defense getting better, if everybody steps up their game mentally and physically.
Now, I do want to turn our attention to this upcoming game against the Steelers, which is going to be another test. It seems like it's poised to be another shootout. You have two high-flying offenses, two very questionable defenses. I think the positive thing for the Falcons is that, the Steeler defense is not as tough, does not have the sort of playmakers that the Bengals have, particularly in their front. There is no Geno Atkins on the Steelers defense. They have a lot more question marks in their secondary. So you do feel a little bit more optimistic that if the Falcons are in a position this week to play, to have to score 50 points in order to win this game, it will be an easier task for them to do against the Steelers defense. I'm curious, sort of, what are the things you're looking forward to watching this Sunday when the Falcons take on the Steelers?
Well, it's going to be an offensive game. It is. And you said you hit the nail on the head. This Pittsburgh Steelers defense is struggling. And this Pittsburgh organization is struggling, because we all know this about Pittsburgh. You didn't hear nothing come out of Pittsburgh. It's been so much noise coming out of these last couple of years. And now you got this whole Le'Veon Bell thing hanging over here. And then tomorrow, when it's open locker room, all their players are going to be talking about it, because I guess he gave a timeline when he's coming in. AB's not getting the ball. Ben's not playing well at all. They can't run the ball. I mean, you remember after the Cleveland game, everybody was like, oh, we don't need Le'Veon. Look at John Carter. He's had 97 yards total in the last 3 games. I mean, you need Le'Veon, because what he does is he dictates what other defenses do. And what you've noticed is that they are doubling AB every single play, because that safety doesn't have to be in the box anymore. And that is what's going on with that. And this is the type of game where I was excited about last week's matchup, because I love me some A.J. Green. And you got 2 premier wide receivers on 2 sides of the ball. This week, you got 2 premier guys. And you don't want this to be the game that Antonio Brown goes off. You know what I'm saying? You don't want this to be that game because once his juices are flowing, that energizes the team. Now, offensively for the Steelers, for the Falcons, just keep doing what you're doing because you can run the ball against this Steelers front, and you damn sure can throw the ball against that Steelers back end. There should not be a lot of pressure. I love Watt. I think he can do things. Bud Dupree, he's hit or miss. They miss Ryan Shazier so much in the middle of that defense that, it's so obvious when we talk about the speed of their defense. They miss all that. Offensively, you got to guard their tight ends. Their tight ends, they are playing well. They got confidence, and Ben likes using those guys. And we know how hard it is to get Big Ben on the ground because he likes to hold the ball. When in the Falcons defense here, they got to tackle. And I think if they can tackle and get Pittsburgh in 3rd and 7 instead of 3rd and 4, where it's, you can either run or pass, they can beat Pittsburgh up there. Now, the atmosphere is going to be rocking. We know in the fourth quarter when they play that stick song and it goes crazy, if they can get to a point where they're taking the crowd out of the game by then, the Falcons should win this football game.
I agree. And I find it interesting you mentioned the tight end because I did want to ask you about that, given that is your position. And watching Vance McDonald just basically own Chris Conte 2 weeks ago in that Buccaneers game. You mentioned how the Falcons' defense is more fast and sort of physical. I'm wondering, is that a concern for you going up against some of these smaller safeties, particularly now with guys like Keanu Neal out, and you have a typical undersized safety in Casey, you have a former corner in Poole, sort of, certainly no one's going to question those guys' toughness. They're very physical. They've been, I think part of the reason why they might, throw their bodies around, throw their heads around is to sort of make up for the fact that they may not be the biggest guys out there. But is that a matchup that you're certainly looking at this Falcons defense that you're concerned with?
Yes, it is. It is because of everything you said. And Conte, he's in everybody's highlight. I feel like I'm not the type of guy. I know what the grind is like, and I've been saying for years about this guy. He's trash. I've been saying it forever. I don't know how he keeps getting a job because he's always getting that. That always happens to him. And let me tell you something. I tweeted it out. I would have had to meet him outside the locker room. I'm going to fight this. I'm going to fight the tight end. You're not just going to do that to me on national TV. It just ain't going to happen. We going to have some issues, man. I'm sorry. I'm going to have to fight you. But yeah, I think that is the matchup that worries me the most in this game is their tight ends match against the Falcons safety. Because just like you said, they're much bigger, they're much more physical. Now, Juju Smith-Schuster, I think they're gonna if it goes by what they've done the last couple of weeks, you'll probably see Alford on Antonio Brown, and you'll probably see Trufant on Juju when they go man to man. I think that'll be the matchup, and you got to worry about Trufant again. The thing with Alford is he's always in position. He just doesn't trust his technique. He's gotten better, but he's still grabby. He still holds. He still does these things, but he has by far been the best corner all of last year and these last 4 games this year. My thing is with these guys, and I said it earlier about 2 guys, Poole and KZ, don't get that damn penalty with you coming in flying. I love physicality of football. I wish they never took it out. But now these rule changes, you cannot be flying in there. And another guy, I'm going to say it again, and I'm going to say it tomorrow on my show. 44, got to show up. Because I know Tat coming. He's going to be there. 44, because you know what he's playing for? He's playing for the Falcons want to extend me and keep me around here. He's got to go get it this weekend.
Yeah, I agree. And we saw the pass rush come alive against a pretty questionable Bengals offensive line. The Steelers won't have those question marks on their offensive line. They have multiple Pro Bowlers, and so you're going to definitely need those guys to step up, particularly Vic Beasley, especially now that you're not going to have Grady Jarrett this week. And so, those guys are going to have to do twice as much work as they normally would because they're not going to have quite the same level of push up the middle. So I agree with you. This is going to be a week where, the Falcons defense is going to have to have a rebound game this week. I'm hoping that they look a lot more like what they looked like in the second half than they did in the first half of last week's game. Are there any other thoughts about this upcoming matchup or this Falcons team that you want to share with us, Randy?
Yeah, well, I saw the tweet that you would tweet out if they had any questions, and I know one of the tweeters called about the play where AJ called a touchdown, and I went back, kept looking at it, and people were saying that it was cover 3, and I was like, hold on. When I'm looking at it, it looks like a version of Tampa 2, because you see Duke Riley, who's the middle linebacker, he's running with the inside seam. Now, the thing, when you got a young player like Oliver, what he has to remind himself is, okay, if we're in cover 2 or cover 3, I have to keep sinking, because that backer, Devondre Campbell, was coming out to the flat to take that running back. You'll take that and let that you'll take that check down, tackle him, game's over. What he did was he was playing in the middle of both of them. And Andy Dalton made a perfect throw. You have got to keep sinking on that play, young man. And like Dan Quinn said at his press conference, it's a learning experience. And a veteran corner would have known that you sink, especially because it's A.J. Green, you're going to sink underneath that route. But people were saying it was cover 3. It looked like Tampa 2 to me, but that was the one question I think that you talked about from one of the guys that tweeted in. And the other one was about the practice squad. Usually you would love to bring your practice squad players up, but maybe they're not ready. They went out and signed guy Michael Bennett from playing for Jacksonville. He's going to be in the D-line. McClain's playing well this year. The guy they brought over from Washington, he's playing well. You said it earlier. It's time for him to put on his big boy pants and grow up and play big now. Because if you're without Grady, I mean, that is another big hole in the middle of that defense.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said, especially on the Oliver breakdown. You're right. I think that's just the young guy not having the sort of situational awareness that you have to defend the touchdown first, not the flat play on that particular coverage. So, Randy, let the people know, you already mentioned several times, what some of the things you're going to be talking about on 92.9 The Game tomorrow and whatnot, but let the people know where they can catch you on Twitter as well as on the radio and elsewhere.
Well, you can always catch me at my Twitter, RandyMac81. I'm always a fun follow through on Sundays, Saturdays and Sundays. You can follow my college football show with John Chucker and Chris Goforth. It's on Saturday mornings, 9 to 12 on 92.9 The Game, college football game time, where we break down the whole college football. Wait for a tailgate show. Me, Andy Bucker, Stan Norfleet. And you can always, like I said, you can always catch me on Twitter. I'm always alive to during the games. I always have funny stories because I live with a house full of kids, my wife, and they're just hilarious. We got a new dog that's getting on my nerves that's going to have to find a new house soon. But other than that, you know what? Just always follow me. Hey, man, it's always a pleasure. Anytime you need me, I'm there for you. It was a pleasure being on your show. I've always, wanted to come on, but I was like, do they want me to come talk Falcons? Because Brian's my guy, even though he's long-winded and everything, but he's my man, and I appreciate you having me on, dog.
Matt, I appreciate you coming, and we'd love to have you back on anytime. Basically, it's an open invitation. You want to pop in for 5 minutes just to talk some trash? By all means, come on the show every week.
My man, appreciate you, my dog.
All right, man. Have a good one.
Take care.
All right, guys. That was Randy McMichael. Appreciate him for coming on the show. We're going to keep this thing moving, talk a little bit, answer some of these mailbag questions. Appreciate Randy for jumping in on a couple of those. Didn't necessarily want to know if he wanted to answer questions about Michael Bennett and practice squad players as we normally do on the show, but appreciate him for giving his contributions. But before we get there, I do want to remind you guys that the show is sponsored by MyBookie.AG. Want to give you some of my picks for this upcoming weekend. I did make some money last week. I did not make money in week 3, but my picks did come through for me a little bit. Technically, the Cardinals game was a push, but I will take the money on the Patriots win covering that line from last week. So this week, as I do on this show, I pick a favorite. I pick an underdog. If you guys sign up for MyBookie, you can definitely let them know that we were the ones that sent you when you sign up. There is an optional form, field in that form that says where did you hear about us, and you can sort of enter Falcon Central Radio as a way of letting them know that they sent you so that they can continue to sponsor the show. We will have a promo code very soon. I don't know officially what that is going to be, but if stay tuned when you can start using that, definitely update you guys on Facebook and whatnot on Falcons Central Radio on Facebook. But anyway, let's get into my picks. My favorite pick, look, the team is undefeated. You got to roll with the Rams. They're -7.5, favored by 7.5 points on the road against the Seattle Seahawks. Earl Thomas is out. This Seahawks team is going to be reeling. We saw a couple of years ago without Earl Thomas that the Seahawks defense is going to crash and burn against, I think, the best offense in the league right now with the Rams. Or if the Chiefs are number one, they're definitely top 5. The Rams are. And you know this Aaron Donald always destroys the Seattle offensive line. And now they have Sue, they have Talib, they have Peters. I personally think this is going to be a blowout. So put your money on the Rams. I'm putting my money on the Rams. I'm putting big money on the Rams this weekend. Last time they played the Seahawks in Seattle, I think they won 42-7 last year at the end of last season. So I feel like this is, as safe a pick as you're going to make. But I say that and then, watch the Rams, struggle going into the fourth quarter or something like that. But my underdog picks, I have 2 this week. One I'm pretty confident in. The other one I'm not so confident in. I have to basically make a decision between now and Sunday whether or not I feel confident enough to throw money at this. My confident pick is the Broncos are underdogs out on the road against the Jets. The Jets are favored by 1 point at this point. That line probably will change, I'm assuming, by the time Sunday, so you definitely want to get in on the action there. But you got to take the Broncos. The defense looked great against the Chiefs last night. Like, if they can do that against the best offense in the league, they certainly should be able to do that against Sam Darnold and that Jets offense. So, I'm not very confident in the Broncos offense right now, but I feel like they'll take care of business against this Jets offense. My less confident pick is the Browns at home. They're plus 3.5 points against the Ravens. The Ravens are favored by 3.5 points. I know the Ravens are coming off a pretty impressive win against the Steelers, but I think that's because the Steelers aren't very good. The Browns at home, I'm hoping that some of that Baker Mayfield mojo is going to rub off and maybe get the Browns to at least cover, if not win this game. So that's my pick. Let's talk about the Falcons-Steelers line. The Falcons are the underdog here. It seems like Vegas is finally off the Falcons bandwagon. They seem to favor them a little bit too much, I think, in some of those early lines going into the year. But now it seems like they're off that, going on the road against the Steelers team. I'll be curious to sort of see. I think if this is another good bet for you guys out there as far as underdogs go. So I think I'm going to break my streak and bet on the Falcons this weekend, bet them to cover this line. I feel reasonably confident that they'll win this game. I'm not super confident. How can you be when you've seen, this defense perform the last couple of weeks? So those are my picks this week for MyBookie. I think you guys should definitely sign up. I just got the word that, yes, you can use that promo code. It is PFC. That's your promo code for you guys when you sign up for MyBookie and whatnot. So head on over to MyBookie and, make a little cash this weekend. Either bet against me, bet with me. It doesn't matter. We can all, figure it out together, I guess, as the season wears on. So without much further ado, let's get into the mailbag questions. Of course, Evan Birchfield's first question pertains to the Bengals game. He asked, who is the brother of the week? Which, for those of you guys that aren't regular listeners, that is the person who sort of performed well, but it's not going to get enough love. My immediate thought was probably Grady Jarrett, because a lot of people were sort of questioning him coming off of the heels of the game. I've seen a lot of people sort of saying, like, maybe he's a little overrated, maybe the Falcons shouldn't pay him, all these sorts of things. I think Grady Jarrett played great in this game. He was dominating Alex Redmond. It basically seemed like almost all of the Falcons' positive pass rushes came against Alex Redmond, the Bengals right guard. I'm trying to think of another player that played really well that probably is going under the radar. Let's see. Oh, Ricky Ortiz. Got to give love to Ricky Ortiz. This was his best game as a Falcon, the fullback. He played really well in this game. Him and Ito Smith look like a really good combination out there. I'm looking forward to seeing what he could do with Devontae Freeman back in the lineup. So, yeah, Ricky Ortiz will be my brother of the week. Brian, at your homeboy, Brian asks, how well do we match up with the Steelers? Do you expect another shootout? Yes. Yeah. I think the Falcons match up pretty favorably. I think the interesting thing is Antonio Brown hasn't been playing like the usual Antonio Brown this season, as Randy mentioned. And so I'm not necessarily worried about Antonio Brown, not because he isn't a guy that you need to worry about, but he's going to get his. He's going to do Antonio Brown things. It's more some of the things we talked about where it's the Vance McDonald's, it's the James Connors, it's the Juju Smith-Schusters, it's the James Washingtons. If those guys get going and start making plays like we saw on Sunday with Gio Bernard having a great day, we saw that with Eifert having early success, we saw that with Tyler Boyd getting going, we even saw John Ross, show up for the first time in his young NFL career. It's when those other guys start to get going, in addition to A.J. Green, in addition to Antonio Brown, is what I'm concerned with, and that's the big question mark for me. If we can contain Vance McDonald, if we can shut down these guys like Juju and whatnot, and James Conner, I will feel very good about the Falcons' defense being able to take care of business, at least be good enough to win this game. So I think it's a favorable matchup. The Steelers' defense is not good. Like, they don't have enough speed at linebacker. They don't have quality safety play. They have some injuries in the secondary. Their most reliable corner is their slot guy, and Mike Hilton, he's out. You also have safety Morgan Burnett, who's been dealing with injuries. The Falcons' offense should feast on the Steelers' defense. To me, the only question I have is whether or not the Falcons are slowed down by the fact that they're playing on the road, whether or not they're slowed down by the fact that I think it is going to rain on Sunday in Pittsburgh. So I'm wondering if, Heinz Field is notorious for horrible field conditions. So I'm wondering if that's going to slow things down for the Falcons, and maybe they won't be able to sort of play as high-flying and explosive as they normally would in, the friendly confines of Mercedes-Benz Stadium. So we'll have to see how that goes. Evan's next question is, what is your confidence level in the Falcons making the playoffs? Not very high. I think I'm not necessarily closing the door on the Falcons making the playoffs, but they obviously need to start getting their act together. They obviously need to, start winning some of these games, possibly running the table between now and the bye week. I think they can still afford to lose one game, potentially the Steelers game, just because it's not going to have major playoff implications because it's an AFC team. If there's any game that they can afford to lose, it's the Steeler game. But I do think, if they can go 3-0 or 2-1, I'm not willing to close the door because I think their schedule, gets a little bit softer in terms of you're not necessarily dealing with as many high-flying offenses in the back half of the season. You have a couple. You have Green Bay and others. But, I feel like this defense will get better as the year wears on, and hopefully the offense can sustain things moving forward. So I feel like after the bye week, they could go like 6-2 or whatever, however many games they have after the bye, and be in that 9-win range. I don't know if that's good enough to make the playoffs. Typically, 10 wins is what you shoot for in order to be a division winner or a wild card team. But I think they'll be in the hunt. So I'm not as willing as others to completely say, nope, season's over. Let's focus on 2019 and whatnot. I'm not there yet, but I could be there, Monday morning if they lose to the Steelers in disappointing fashion. Evan Burchfield says Jack Crawford's snap count went up this week as DQ wanted. Thoughts? I thought Jack Crawford did a solid job. I think he's had his two best games the last 2 weeks. So they put more on his plate the last two games due to the injury of Derek Shelby. I thought he's performed reasonably well. The only knock I have on Jack Crawford is he needs to not fall on the ground as much. He rushes with such urgency that he tends to lose his balance. If he's trying to stunt or twist with somebody and someone comes and nudges him, he falls down. He gets overextended, and there's a couple of times where he's about to get a pressure, he's about to get a hit, and he gets he trips over his own feet, or the offensive lineman pushes him down and he falls down. That's the only knock I have on Jack Crawford moving so far. But he's been playing reasonably well at both defensive and D tackle. Evan Birchfield's next question is: so far, would you call Calvin Ridley a steal considering how late he was drafted? Yeah, I mean, he's outperformed my expectations. I was, going into the season, yeah, he'll do some things. He'll have some big games here and there. and then he'll have these games where he has like 2 catches for like 12 yards or something like that. And there'll be sort of these ups and downs. My hope is that we haven't seen all the ups happen in the first month of the season, and then the rest of the season is just full with all the downs. I'm hoping that he can sort of sustain this throughout the rest of the season. But yeah, man, he's been playing absolutely out of his mind these last couple of games, and I don't see any reason why that's going to slow down, particularly this week against Pittsburgh, and then the following week against Tampa Bay, and then, and so on and so forth. So, yeah, absolutely, been a steal for the Falcons. Brian asked, how much of an impact do you think Greg Knapp has had on our offense being high scoring again? I'm sure he has had some impact. I don't know how much you will attribute, Sark's success to, Greg Knapp's coaching in the film room with the quarterbacks, as well as what he's doing up in the booth during the game to sort of read coverages. But the Falcons have done a much better job in terms of attacking coverages. How much of that is Knapp? How much of that is just Sark understanding and doing a better job than he did in his first year? I don't know, but I think you have to attribute some of the Falcons' offensive success to Knapp. I just don't know how much. I'm not willing to go overboard and be like, the only reason Sark is performing at a high level is because of Greg Knapp. I think that's kind of ridiculous. Sark deserves, as much of the credit as he deserves, for what the Falcons are doing. We got a couple of questions about Michael Bennett. I think, picking up on what Randy said, I think the Bennett signing is a decent move. He was a guy that I sort of had my eye on the last couple of summers because he's sort of been on the bubble in Jacksonville and was a guy that I was very high on when he came out of college in Ohio State a couple of years ago, has been dealing with injuries these last 2 seasons, and sort of in that time period, him being off the field and in the trainer's room, the Jaguars have gotten much better production from their interior defensive tackles and their depth. And so each year he's come back and been pushed further and further down the depth chart through no fault of his own. And so one wonders if sort of that player that I thought he would be coming out of Ohio State, when I sort of saw him as like a 3rd round, 2nd round, day 2 talent, and he wound up being a 6th round pick. I wonder if the Falcons can sort of get some of that. You can see flashes of that, but right now I'm not necessarily going to hold my breath that he's going to do a whole lot when he gets opportunities on the field, just like similar to what we saw with Justin Zimmer. Like, I thought Zimmer did a decent job in that Saints game, but, I'm not necessarily expecting Bennett to really move the needle as far as what he's going to do early on. But if he does get extended reps as the season wears on, then maybe, by the time we get in like late October and November, maybe he could start being a little bit more of a reliable contributor. Big Boy Brewski asks a similar question about Bennett, but he also adds, could the Falcons bring in Ayers or Coney Ely to help load the pass rush? How can we fix this team to make the playoffs if there's a chance? The fact that the Falcons worked out Michael Bennett today, Carl Klug, Robert Ayers, and Coney Ely and signed Bennett sort of tells you that those other 3 guys, for whatever reason, obviously I wasn't there, I was chilling in my home eating chicken wings while those guys were working out for the Falcons. I think it tells you that those guys were, if the Falcons thought those guys were worthwhile signings, they would have signed them. Now, they'll keep them potentially on the back burner. We saw that 2 weeks ago when they worked out both Corey Nelson and Bruce Carter. Then they signed Nelson. He got hurt. Then they wound up bringing Carter in this past week. So if another injury happens or another move needs to be made, then you can sort of see some of those guys on speed dial, potentially. But I think at this point, I don't know. Ayers, he's at an age now that I'm kind of assuming that he's done. The fact that he got signed by the Lions and then was gone within 24 hours. Coney Ely has always sort of been an overrated player in my eyes. Like, he's a body. I don't think he's necessarily going to move the needle too much in terms of adding to your pass rush. Carl Klug was a very talented situational pass rusher on the interior for many years in Tennessee. He didn't look like he was that player anymore, and that's part of the reason why Tennessee moved on from him this past offseason. So, bringing in these guys on the wrong side of 30 or a guy like Ely, I don't necessarily know if that's going to pay huge dividends. Arguably they could pay more dividends than signing a guy like Michael Bennett just because Bennett hasn't proven himself. But Bennett at least has some upside. I don't know if those guys. I think those guys have seen their best years in years past. So who knows? How can we fix the team to make the playoffs? To answer your question, Bruce, I mean, the offense needs to keep sustaining. I think they need to be a little bit more balanced on offense. And I think they need to get more consistent pass rush. And I think if they can do those three things, they can win games. I don't necessarily, I wouldn't necessarily expect this team to get far in the postseason. But, if they can sort of do those things, and hopefully Deion Jones will come back and Grady Jarrett will come back and provide a spark for this defense so that they can do a little bit more than that, then, I think they still have a shot. Cheddar Mark asked, do y'all think Jordan Phillips can provide any services in ATL? Saw he was cut today. I've been a big fan of Jordan Phillips for many years, going back to his days at Oklahoma. He was a absolute physical specimen. I think it was like 350 pounds and ran like a 4.840 or something ridiculous. He put up ridiculous testing numbers. He was very athletic coming out of school. Never really, I thought, kind of always got a raw deal in Miami. And Miami sort of has always had, an eye looking elsewhere at that D tackle position to find another complement for Ndamukong Suh until they let Suh go. And, apparently Jordan Phillips hasn't been happy in Miami, apparently under this Gase regime or whatever. I don't know the details of that, but apparently there were questions of his effort, and there's other guys brought in that, were lesser players that were playing more and all those sorts of things. So I don't know any things about that, so I won't necessarily comment on that. But he was a guy that I had my eye on because every preseason when the Falcons have played the Dolphins the last 3 years, he's been dominant in those preseason games. He's always been a guy that has popped to me when I watched them during the regular season. I remember watching the Dolphins play the Patriots, and when I was preparing to scout the Patriots for the Super Bowl, and I remember him popping a number of times going up against the Patriots late in that season. So he's a guy that I think has a lot of talent. The knock on Phillips is he's not a huge pass rusher. He's competent, particularly for a guy his size, but he's more sort of fitting in that same mold that Deidre Sanat fills. I think he'll be an excellent rotational piece for the Falcons that maybe they could salvage him a little bit, and sort of get an early jump on 2019 free agent signings, because that's where he would be a free agent after this season had he not been cut by the Dolphins. So, he'd definitely be a guy I'd be very willing to kick the tires on, because he's been a guy that I've had my eyes on for at least two summers as a future Falcon. Our last question comes from there was a question from George that Randy answered earlier about guys being on the practice squad and whatnot. And so it basically boils down to that, typically if a guy's particularly this year, many of the, no offense to those guys, but many of the guys on the Falcons practice squad, I don't think are necessarily the next man up, the guys that you're going to call in the event of an injury. I don't even know everybody that's on the practice squad because the Falcons have had to shuffle it so much these first couple of weeks. But for the most part, there haven't been many guys that the Falcons have picked up that have been like, oh, that guy, I'm glad we kept him on the practice squad so that one day he'll get an opportunity to play and contribute to the Falcons. So as far as, the D-line position goes and the linebacker and safety, all those injuries there, I don't think there's really that many options there for the Falcons on the practice squad. So that's part of the reason why I think there's been so many people pushing for the Falcons to seek outside options, including guys like Michael Bennett and whatnot. So there you have it, guys. Appreciate you tuning in for another episode of Falcon Central Radio, part of Pro Football Central Radio Network. Check us out at profootballcentral.com if you want to find the links to all of our iTunes shows. You can also, of course, follow us on Facebook, Falcon Central Radio. Give us a like so that you can catch us there. You can also subscribe to the Pro Football Central YouTube page. Hit the bell icon so that you definitely get updates when we go live on these Tuesday evenings. And trying to think, what else do I need to plug before I go? Falcons is my Twitter handle. And make sure you hit up MyBookie. Use that promo code PFC as a way to sort of steer them towards us, and we'll keep these picks going. Hopefully, you guys will make some money this year. That's part of our sponsored effort. And again, I want to give a shout out to Randy McMichael again for joining us and talking Falcons with us. Had a lot of fun chat with him. And of course, check him out on 92.9 The Game, the college football game time show, where they're talking college football all the time, as well as NFL stuff. So appreciate you guys tuning in this week. We'll be back next Tuesday to talk about this Falcons-Steelers matchup. Certainly want to send in your questions at #Falcons Mailbag, as well as the show's Twitter handle, Falcons PFC. It seems like it's been so long since I've done one of these shows. I'm forgetting how to plug at the end of the show. But it's all coming back to me before the end. So there you have it, guys. And we'll be back next week to talk Falcons, Steelers, as well as Falcons, Bucks.